Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Matt Jones, and I am joined by Noreen Pratscher. And we are so happy that you're here with us and the rest of the TrueCar family to celebrate different voices of women in our automotive industry. As you know, if you've watched the show before, this is something that we do to bring on some of the brightest and best minds in automotive to talk about things that can move us all a little bit forward as an industry. But today is pretty special because I'm thrilled to be hosting what is sure to be a powerful discussion about the unique challenges and opportunities presented to women in today's modern automotive industry. So in just a couple moments, we're going to be joined by some of these brightest and best minds from across different disciplines of automotive. I think that's really important because quite often when the automotive conversation comes up, most of our minds, we just think of automotive retail. And what we're hoping to do is expand that conversation beyond just automotive retail, because those of us who are in the business, we know quite how big this is. But before we begin, I'd really like to thank TrueCar for not only allowing these conversations, but encouraging them. And so with the utmost sincerity, I'd like to thank you for turning in and for being a part of this conversation. And Noreen Pratscher, I'd like for you to take a second to introduce yourself to the folks who may not be quite as familiar with you.
Hi, thank you again. I'll echo Matt's thanks for joining this very important conversation and express my appreciation to TrueCar for giving us the space to have these conversations. My name is Noreen Pratscher. I'm the head of corporate communications at TrueCar, and I look forward to joining other leaders in the automotive industry to learn more about insights and experiences and how we can all help automotive move forward on DEI and for women in particular. And thank you to Matt for hosting this amazing program.
Thank you. Well, I don't want to monopolize everybody's time, so let's just jump into it. And let's start with the introductions, bring everybody in. First, I would like to bring in Bridget Fitzpatrick, who is the co-founder and host of CBT News.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Bridget. Thank you for making the time. And you're in Florida right now, right?
We are in Florida right now, yes.
Okay, I'm in California. Noreen, you're in North Carolina?
That's correct. Outside of Charlotte.
We're nationwide right now. Next up, I would like to bring in Kirsten von Busch. She is the director of product marketing for Experian.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me. And continuing with our nationwide theme, I'm in Chicago, so representing the Midwest.
Hopefully it's not snowing there, Kirsten.
Not right now, but it's not warm.
Next up, I'd like to bring in Tonya Vinson-Blander. She is the executive director of Rivian Financial Services and brand manager at JPMorgan Chase.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. So again, keeping with the same theme, I am seated right now in New York, and then I actually physically reside in Dallas, Texas. So, I think we're covering the U.S. with everyone on the phone.
Well, I don't want to get outmanned here, so I'm going to bring in another California. I would like to bring in Brenna Stansberry. She is the co-owner of Park Marina Motors. She is a member of the NIADA. She is on the board of directors, and she is also a Navy veteran. Welcome to the show, Brenna.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's such an honor to be on a panel with so many amazing women, and you as well, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we're in this. So again, as we said at the outskirt, we don't want to monopolize everybody's time. So I'm going to just, jump right in it. We want to get to know you a little bit better, right? So I'd like for the panelists, I'd like to give you all an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do. And I think, Tonya, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you for allowing me again to be part of the panel. So as you started at the top of the conversation, my name is Tonya Vinson-Blander. I actually work for JPMorgan Chase, and I support the Rivian relationship, the OEM and Rivian Financial Services. So just really briefly about my background, I've got, I'll just say a dozen decades in the automotive industry. Absolutely love this industry. It is like no other. I've had the opportunity to do sales, compliance, and all of that. But at the end of the day, what I really am excited about this particular conversation is because, like the panelists that are on the phone, we really need to think about how do we continue to engage women and help them understand that there's some really great opportunities in the automotive industry. So thank you, Matt.
Well, thank you. I think we're going to have an opportunity to dive right in that. And next up, I would like to ask Bridget Fitzpatrick, introduce yourself and what you do.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bridget Fitzpatrick. I am the co-founder of CBT News. For those of you that don't know, CBT News is a platform for dealer principals and their staff to get their news, trends, best practices, and insights that impact what they're doing every day, and to help them make the decisions they need to make to run their dealerships better. CBT News is celebrating 10 years this year, so we're very excited and proud about that. What we're talking about today, we talk about all the time. We have articles, videos with the thought leaders on this topic all over CBT News, so be sure to take a look at that.
Awesome, and thank you. And thank you for everything that you and CBT News do for automotive. Next up, I would like to ask Kirsten to introduce herself and what she does.
Yeah, my pleasure, Matt. So I'm Kirsten von Busch. I'm currently the Director of Product Marketing at Experian Automotive. And I've been at Experian for a number of years. Prior to that, I was at a large DMS company and was there for a number of years. And at this point, I now have 20 plus years in the auto industry. My entire professional career has always been automotive. And my current role, I love because it offers me the opportunity to talk about the great solutions and insights that we can bring to the market, but also to be an ambassador for women in the auto industry.
That's awesome. And it's everything that you do is vitally important. I don't know that everybody understands quite the span of how much Experian impacts automotive. So I'm really glad to have you here to talk about, more than just running credit, And I would also, Brenna, you're up.
Yeah, hi. My name is Brenna Stansberry. I am from Northern California. I have been in the automotive business about 30 years, maybe a little bit longer. My parents opened up the dealership over 40 years ago. So I did 5-year stint in the Navy and a couple of years on my own between that and joining the automotive business. Been doing it for over 30 years, and I've been running our family-owned dealership for about 10 years now.
That's awesome.
And love it.
That's one common thread, is that we all love this industry in our different disciplines. We've all found ways to be in this mega industry and create impact. And again, I think it's really important. It's vital that we share with people who are trying to figure out what they're doing next, that this can be a destination. So the next question I have for you guys, and and I'm going to ask you, Bridget. I'm going to start with you, Bridget. When you were in school trying to determine your career path, was automotive on the radar? Was it on your plate?
Like so many others, no, it was not.
No? Okay. Noreen, what about you?
Not at all.
No? Tonya, you?
I'm a car lover, but no, not from a finance side for sure. Yeah.
Okay, Brenna, you don't count because we know you're genetically encoded to do this. Kirsten, you said
No.
but no, not you either.
I didn't want to do it.
What about you, Kirsten?
I'm in the no camp as well. It was
Okay.
not front of mind.
So we got, and I'm the same thing. Been in this business for, I guess this is my 22nd, almost 23rd year. It wasn't on the radar either. So we got 6 big brains or 5.5 big brains on this show right now. And I think that we're doing big things, but none of us intended to get into this industry. And so I don't know that, falling into this industry is necessarily an effective recruiting tactic for the people who want to bring in extra brains. So my next question that I want to follow up with is, how can we actively and effectively reach out and recruit and retain and develop women in this industry when this may not initially be, a destination industry? And so to start with that question, I think that I want to start that actually with you, Bridget, if I can.
Okay, sure. I think that making the dealership or the company more attractive to women with better work hours, a 40-hour work week, as you know, is not standard in the industry, but it could be. I think we could start there. Also, maternity leave with pay and the security of knowing that you're going to have your job when you come back. That's very important to women. And then also maybe a quota for hiring managers and general managers to have, when they're hiring, to have a certain number of women or a percentage of women that they have to hire. And maybe even tie that to their compensation. I think that would drive some change.
So you're talking about doing something that's just thoughtful and not just waiting for people to walk in and drop off that application, right?
Exactly.
Creating an environment that might attract people. Totally get it. Kirsten.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything that Bridget said, and I'd expand on that to include senior leadership visibility. You know, it's so simple, but if you can see her, you can be her. And to see women in positions of not only just roles, but leadership roles, that there's a career path and a growth and an opportunity for that in the industry. I think that's so important. And also educating about the auto industry, that it's not just selling cars. I mean, obviously that's so important and none of us would be here if we weren't doing that, but there's a lot of different things that you can do to support that, whether it is from the manufacturer side, the lending side, you know, software, data, the opportunities are really endless in this industry.
And I really like how you said making sure that people have access to senior leadership. If you could see her, you could be her. I think that's really important because I think the census said, and this may not be accurate from 2022, but I looked at this a couple years ago, that at least on the retail side of automotive, 20% of the people who are on the retail side of automotive identify as female. But having spent 12 years in car dealerships myself, I'll say, yeah, there was 20% women who worked there. They may not have been in sales, they might have been in, they might have been in accounting, or they might have been title clerks or something like that. They weren't necessarily in sales. So although the number was there, the representation wasn't necessarily there. I could totally imagine a person like my sister who may say that she wanted to go sell cars, walk into a dealership, see nothing but a bunch of dudes and just hightail it out of there. So the access to these folks and putting them in front, I really like that. Tonya, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I echo what both of my colleagues said before, but I think there's a couple of things. When I think about the baseline, it's just awareness. I mean, I think that's what we're describing is just awareness of the types of opportunities that are out there. I will tell you, when you asked a question before about, did I think about this was when I was in college or high school, I didn't, because I didn't think about the auto industry having any finance arm, having a marketing arm, all of those type of things, having the manufacturer. So I think awareness is one of them. Just making sure people are aware of all the different types of careers that are out there. I think Bridget or Kirsten talked about a little bit of, if you could see her, you could be her. So those informal mentorships, recognizing that women's path in the automotive industry might slightly be different, but making sure that they have those informal mentors to help them navigate through it. So I think that those are the key things to be able to even, identify that someone wants to be part of the industry, but then to retain them, you really have to think about what's the unique experiences, like Bridget said, what do they need differently in order for them to feel as though they can bring themselves to this industry.
You know what? I think there's two things that hopefully we can come back to if time allows. Bring your unique self to the industry and mentorship. So Tonya, don't lose those thoughts, okay? Because we're probably going to touch on them again. Brenna, who was essentially born and bred in this industry, other than going to the Navy for a while. What do we do to be more effective recruiters of women to the industry? And I know that you're excellent at it, so I've been waiting to ask you.
I appreciate you saying that. I think it's a really, being on the retail side, that is a really difficult stereotype to overcome. How many of us have driven into a car dealership and it's a flock of men that come out to help you. When a female approaches a customer, all those stereotypes, all those walls drop. And so for a woman to know that they have power in just being a woman, that's not even spoken. But what we do here is we offer a lot of training. We sent some of our staff to management training. We're a small dealership. I only have 16 employees right now. So, our opportunities are a lot smaller, but we do everything we can to encourage and develop anybody that wants to be developed, whether it be male or female. But I enjoy the reactions I get from my female employees when I say, I want you to do this. They're like, really? Yes. So much potential. It's amazing.
It's interesting. This isn't a secret for you and I, but for folks who haven't necessarily worked in the retail side, anecdotally at least, my experience has been female salespeople will outsell male salespeople. Female finance managers will outright male finance managers. In every position I've seen where there's been men and women, maybe it's just coincidence, maybe it's just been luck of the draw. I don't know. I don't know the science behind it. But the female employee segment has outperformed the male employee segment. And so when we talk about what Bridget alluded to earlier, the more regular work week, working aggressively to bring these folks into the industry, it's not just the right thing to do. It makes great business sense. Anecdotally, these folks outperform the norm. So I think it's another reason why we want to have this broader conversation. Noreen, I know you've had some experience, and don't just draw on your time at TrueCar, but also talk about your time as a communications manager at General Motors. What do you think we need to do as an industry to bring people further in?
As we've all kind of talked about, promote the automotive industry as a destination for every potential demographic as a future employee. I went to GM. I'm going to date myself, but I answered an ad in the newspaper, believe it or not, back in the day, and had a wonderful 12-year career there, starting in manufacturing communications in a plant, working all the way up to being a member of the global product and brand team, which was fantastic. I've since bounced around other sectors in communication roles, and I was just delighted when TrueCar came calling 18 months ago to bring in a new communications leader. And so how do we attract more females into our industry? It's what every one of my esteemed panelists has said. It's visibility. And so one of the things we're starting at TrueCar is to spotlight our female employees within our team, and also our female partners across our business, to make more women aware of career opportunities that exist, and maybe not just in sales, but in all of the functions. And once we recruit them in, of course, as we've talked about, then we have to work to retain them, because it can be a tough working environment. And we need to make sure we take special care and pay special attention to different types of employees, and do our best to meet their needs as well as meet the needs of the business.
So I think if the people watching, you take reins from this and you implement them into your recruiting strategy, there's enough information right here to give you a pretty solid foundation, whether it be dealership, whether it be tech, whether it be whatever it is, to help, diversify your staff or your recruiting staff. But I think here's the $1 million question for those who are not convinced. And I've already given my reasons why. Why should the industry be looking to recruit and develop more women? I mean, are there advantages? This is a two-part question, and I guess we'll just get to it conversationally. First, are there advantages? And I think there'll be a follow-up question to that too. So I'm going to go with you, Kirsten. Why should the industry be interested in more aggressively attracting women into the fold?
Well, I think to start with, women influence purchases, and the percentage of automotive purchases that women influence is staggering, right? I believe the last statistic was over 80% of all automotive vehicle purchases are influenced by women. Why wouldn't you want women in the industry then, if that's the consumer you're attempting to attract? Right. So I think it just makes good business sense as well.
You're saying like a closer synergy. And Brenna, I'm going to ask you this next, because you kind of alluded to that when people walk onto the dealership and they see not a flock of seagulls, but a flock of dudes, right? So let's talk about advantages that the industry could have from your point of view of attracting more women and retaining them.
Yeah, just going back to what you spoke about a few minutes ago, the women sell more cars. Women sell more product and finance. It is crazy when I look at my board and see my female salesperson selling half of my sales for the month. So I think there's, like I said, those stereotypical walls just come down when they're approached by a woman out on the lot. And women seem to be, we think with both sides of our brain, we're not, we bring something completely different to the table when it comes to sales. And I I'm not very good at sales. I couldn't be a salesperson if you paid me. But there are some amazing women out there that can just talk to people. And I think there's a relationship connection that happens between women and either not just other women, but men as well. That doesn't happen when it's man to man. And like Kirsten alluded to, women make that decision. There's so many times where we hear, well, I have to check with my wife before I buy this truck. Or my wife doesn't like this color, I can't buy it. It happens all the time. So,
Brenna, it's really funny that you say that. I think I was on like year 3 of selling cars, and that is a common objection from married men, right? I need to check it with my spouse. But I think it was about year 3 that I realized that married women don't necessarily need to check with their spouse, right? I'd see husbands come in and look at the car and say, okay, I got to talk with my wife. I got to talk this over. But I'd also see wives come in from beginning to end and say, no, I'm going with this, interesting. And I think, Kirsten, that goes back to your point of the span of influence, and so we need to align with that. Tonya, what are some of the unique advantages bringing women into this industry we might benefit from?
Well, you started off earlier about talking about the business, it's good for business. So, and I'm a data junkie. So I was looking at a McKinsey study, which was a couple of years ago, and it said women had $10 trillion of the assets. By 2030, they're expecting women to have $30 trillion worth of the assets. So if that's not a great business case to be able to say women are going to have more buying power as we continue to age, grow, the decades pass, all of that. So it's really critical for our industry to think about how do we start creating that bench strength so that we have succession planning, that we have women who are interested in it, and women continue to change and help us evolve. I'll just give you one quick thing. I think what's really fascinating is that you also have women in the industry who recognize that we need to be more active. So we had a group within our bank, within Chase Auto, that said, hey, we need to make sure that we've got a bench strength for our women. So they designed a women in auto so that they can mentor, help develop young ladies who are already in our organization, but help them think about their career differently. And I think that's where the grassroots efforts have to take place.
I think what you hit on is really going to go effective to the retention. If a person is developed and they can see a path for themselves, within that company or within that vertical, it would make sense for them to stick around. Why? I mean, we'd have lower attrition if people felt like there was an opportunity for them in their space and place. So I really love what you and your team are doing over at Chase, especially around the CRGs. Noreen?
Again, echoing what all of my esteemed colleagues have said, women carry a lot of buying power, and it's helpful when organizations represent their customer base and people can walk in and see people who look like them as part of that transaction, whether it's on the sales floor or in the finance or even in the service department. I think organizations do well when they reflect their customer base, and also the more diverse voices around the table, the better the decisions that ultimately get made. And there's all kinds of data that proves that out, that the more you can expand the people that you include in making important business decisions, the better your business outcomes will be. So there's a very tangible, hard-nosed business reason to be thinking about including diverse voices in your business.
Bridget?
Yes, to go along with what everyone's saying, we understand the needs of the female buyer as well. So on the other side, that is helpful. And then also we have a responsibility to hire other females. So that's a great asset for us to take advantage of.
All right. So I think, and I'm really pleased with everything that we've heard. Of course, we're going to get some great nuggets in this conversation. We already knew this when we all saw who was coming on it, but to be able to effectively and articulate and forgive me for how I'm going to say this, there is money to be made by doing the right thing. Your business can expand and grow by doing the right thing. It's not just kumbaya and feel good about yourself. You can, if done properly, reap rewards. And I think that's, none of us are, although we love automotive, I don't think any of us would do this for free. So we need to get the most out of our times as a company. And so I hope the people watching are hearing this and taking notes as well. Actually, don't take notes, just watch the replay and you can hear it again in real time. So we talked about some of the advantages of bringing, women into automotive, but, let's not sugarcoat it. There's got to be some challenges, and challenges that are invisible to me and challenges that are invisible to a lot of people who are watching. So my next question is, have you had any challenges in your career, either now or earlier, that you would attribute to being a female in this industry? And I want to kick that question to you, Noreen.
I was hoping you wouldn't start with me.
I have to. I had one chance to put my boss on the spot. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. Joining the General Motors culture was eye-opening for me for a lot of reasons, because up until then I'd only worked for smaller organizations. But also joining in a manufacturing plant, which is predominantly male in UAW. You can imagine the bit of culture shock that I went through. So I wouldn't qualify it as a challenge so much as a learning opportunity to really dig in. I always knew about the importance of relationships, but to learn how to better meet people where they are, to be successful, especially in a communications role, that's a starting point. And so building relationships with the guys on the floor, to the point where I'd be sometimes climbing into the equipment to learn how something works, because I'm innately curious about everything, really earned their respect because I was willing to get my hands dirty, as they say, and helped me better understand what issues were important to them to learn about. And then that could inform and frame the communications I was driving in the organization, and help be the bridge between the plant management and the guys, and I'll call them guys because they were predominantly were the guys on the floor. And that grounding experience really helped me as I progressed through my career at General Motors. Moving into the supporting the white collar functions was a little bit different and a little bit more familiar to me, but I never forgot those lessons learned on the plant floor.
So although it was I know you don't want to use the word challenge, although it was I'm gonna say it was a challenging experience. You're saying some things came out of it that have helped shape your career and help you land you where you are right now. And I love to hear that, because sometimes, people have challenges and they're unable to find a solution to them, and it's like a cross some people have to bear, or a weight they have to bear. But we could talk about that later. Tonya, have you had any challenges that you would say are unique to being a woman in this industry?
None at all, Matt. No, yeah, naturally, I think that, you think about the panelists that we have on the phone today. All of us probably have encountered being the only one in the room, right? And so that in itself can sometimes be a little bit overbearing, especially when you're trying to drive change and you don't necessarily have an ally or someone who understands the way you're envisioning. So again, I think Bridget talked about women are very dynamic in their thinking. I'm not saying that men are not, but we might be thinking about, how does the process impact the family, impact our friends, impact whatever it is. So we're thinking full circle to a solution. So I could say that's one of the challenges I've encountered is sometimes being the only in the room. And I'll say also, quite candidly, being the only woman of color in the room. When we look at the auto industry, I think the latest statistics I saw was only about 6% of women of color were even in the industry. And so I think that, when we talk about allyship and really being visible, I think it's extremely important for women of color and to be visible, to also have allies to allow us to be visible.
Well, we're going to also talk about allies, and Bridget had said something earlier, so I'm going to ask that next question to you. You talked about challenge, or if you've had any challenges in this industry, but one of the things that you said when I talked about recruitment is you said it should be a mandate that people should be looking to hire, so that we don't have the Tonya experience, or we've all had that experience, right? So in your, Bridget, in your experience in this industry, have you had any challenges that you'd say are unique because of your gender?
I have. I've had quite a few. Probably we can do a whole nother panel discussion on each one and what I learned from each one. But I think that there's a lot of men in the industry that still have the good old boy mentality. I don't want to paint with a broad brush, because there are a lot of men that have embraced me and have been completely respectful. Most of them are, but there's still a few. I'll give a quick example just to kind of put some context here. There's a very well-known person that I was going to interview earlier in the CBT days, and was really excited about it. It was a big interview for us. So started interviewing him about his book, and he turned to me and said, well, you probably wouldn't read my book because you probably read romance novels. Well, things like that, just they happen more often than not. I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this. And back in the day, I was very passive about it. I thought, okay, well, he's never going to be on CBT again. And that's really not the way to handle it. I think moving forward, I've learned over the years that maybe pulling the person aside or shooting them a quick email, letting them know, because they might not know what they're doing. They might not realize that they're being offensive or disrespectful. So I think a lot of men in our industry, the majority are older white men, and this is the way they were raised, this is the way their father was, this is the way their mother was treated, and this is all they know. So I think that the awareness, the conversation that we're having today is very important, and it needs to continue. I think it's great that we have Women's History Month in March, but talking about it every month until we are considered equal is where we need to be.
Totally agree. And I think, I want to get on, and I'm going to ask you that question next, Kirsten, but I think that you said something, Bridget, that's very important, is that the person may have been offensive and not known it and not attended to, right? And that's, in some ways, that's the worst to deal with, because they're not trying to be confrontational.
Right.
It's just there, and you're like, oh man, dang, So I really love how you also said that, you might handle it differently now than you would have handled it, at the point. I think that's really important as we think about people in different developmental cycles of their, people who are watching this. My son, I love my son to death. He's 27, so I consider him a young person still. He may not, but I do. And I understand that, the way that I might handle a problem may be materially different than I would have at 27, or the way that he would have at 27. So I think it's very important that you said, at that time, I might have done it this way. Now I think it's this way. We don't want to give these blanket statements without respecting where people are in their development process. So kudos to that. Kirsten, like I said, you're up next. Have you had any challenges that you would identify with your gender?
Absolutely. As Bridget said, there could be an entire panel and just conversation on this topic alone. But I think something that you both just touched on is so important to reinforce is that when you know better, do better, right? Where this is a journey for all of us. And as I've grown in my career, there's certainly situations that I would now handle differently than, than how I dealt with them in the past. And I think it's that onus is on us as well to handle them, because if someone doesn't know, well, then they're going to continue doing the same thing. So providing that awareness, that education, that insight, where then hopefully they can know better and do better in the future.
And it goes back to your earlier point, Kirsten, about if you see her, you can be her. And it's not just seeing that executive or seeing that person at the top of the hill. It's like, how does that other person handle something that I might go through as well? I need to see a positive example of how to handle it. I think that's really important. And I want to get back to that when we talk on mentorship again, because I think that there's an overlay there. Brenna, have you had any problems? You're in retail.
Yeah. My problems stemmed from internally. They stemmed from my dad. Even when I was 17 and I joined the Navy, they placed bets on how long I was going to last in boot camp with the sales staff. I didn't know about that till later, obviously, but thinking about this question, and then eventually coming into the family business, I worked in the office because that's where women belonged. Again, that was 30 years ago, so that's obviously changed at this point. And then about 10 years ago, when I said, Dad, I can run the lot. You're 73 years old. You need to retire. You've earned it. I was told I can't do it. You're a girl. You can't do that. You're a girl. And like you guys just talked about, it does go back to some of these older men that, my dad's that guy. My dad is that guy. And it was a challenge, but I don't think I ever really recognized it. I think I just went, oh, okay, well, just give me a few minutes or give me a few days or give me a few months and I'm going to show you. I've always just kind of gone, okay, well, that's your opinion. I'm going to do it anyway. And so it's been really interesting because I didn't notice the challenge until after, even though it was in my face. But knowing that there are still a lot of men, thank the Lord that there's a lot of these old guys still out there because they do bring a lot of wisdom to the table. We get to learn from that, and we get to learn that things are a lot different now. And I think that the last 2 generations have turned the table on that. And the way even my dad has said, I doubted you. I told you you couldn't do it. And he goes, girl, you've got far beyond what he could have imagined. And I think that those men are seeing that happen. And I think a lot of men are threatened by it.
It might be a little bit, Brenna, you said something that you didn't see it because you're too busy just living, right? Mm-hmm. You're too busy being in the throes of it to figure out like what all the potential dynamics are. And so you just went through and fought through. And I think for the whole industry, I think that we're all benefiting from you fighting through. You work with NIADA is fantastic. Park City Marina is fantastic. Some of the people that I've had the luck of meeting, some of the people that you're bringing up, and they're fantastic. So personally, sincerely, I'd like to say I thank you for fighting that good fight because the industry is better with you than it would have been without you. I think there's something to be said about being in an environment where you know that you're, I think to Tonya's point, maybe one of one, right? Or maybe one of two out of 100, right? And it becomes easy to say, is this a slight? I don't know if it's a slight, but it feels like one. And even when it's not, now there's a monster, whether it's intended, whether it's not intended, and it stops you, Tonya, or stops people, like to Tonya's point earlier, of showing up as their true, authentic self, right? So identifying these challenges in these conversations and how people overcame them when they can, I think is incredibly important, especially when we talk about the mentorship a little. You know what? Forget later. We're going to talk about that now. Because Kirsten, you said something about showing up showing up in a way that people can see. Tonya, when people have challenges, do you think a mentorship or having a mentor that they could talk to who maybe has been there, do you think that might be, advantageous beyond just, helping them career grow, like conflict resolution, things like that?
Yeah, I think for me personally, what I have found, I have 2 boards. I have a personal board of directors and I have a professional board of directors. And those are the people who are honest with me, brutally honest of, back to your point, Matt, is this a slight or is it Tonya? Because sometimes, we all have, we're adults, but that adulthood also fosters from that little kid that we were at some point, right? So we don't necessarily lose some of those things that were our triggers. They just become different triggers. And so to your question, I think it's important to have people who you can have candid conversations with, whether it's venting with them, because we all need to get it off of our chest, but ultimately who only give you a short period of time to have a pity party. And then they help you figure out how to navigate through it, because someone before all of us on the phone navigated through to allow all of us on the phone to be in the position that we are. And that to me is important for the legacy. So the legacy that I'd like to leave. And so that's either in mentorship, informal, but it's really just showing up. And as I would say, as a Southern woman, showing out. So
showing up and showing out. Yes. Now, this is, I think somebody mentioned that this is Women's History Month. It's a time of celebration, or it should be, right? And so let's transition into celebration a little bit, or at least the idea of celebration. And so the question I propose to the panel is, does the industry do enough to celebrate women and elevate women? And I'm going to put a little caveat on there. I'm not just talking about women as entities. I'm talking about women's voices, women's point of views, women's perspectives. Does the industry do enough to elevate women and women's voices? And if not, in addition to what Noreen said that we're doing here at TrueCar, what are some other things that we can do to elevate voices? And so Bridget, I think out of all of us, I think you probably have the biggest sound stage to celebrate and elevate. So I'm going to start this conversation with you.
Yes, I don't think that we do enough as an industry. I think some of the things that we can do is celebrate or acknowledge women throughout the year. Like I mentioned, this once a month and is great. And there are a lot of companies doing a lot of great things in March, including us. But the conversation needs to continue throughout the year. The men have had a 100-year head start on us in this industry. And we've got a lot of catching up to do. And until, like I said before, until we are equal, then we can't stop talking about it. I think that there are a lot of large companies with Ally, CDK, TrueCar. You guys are doing a great job leading this conversation and making sure it's at the forefront. But there are things that they can do with sponsorships of women organizations and some of the associations that are out there, Women in Automotive or Women of Color Automotive Network, that they can really kind of back and get behind to help move the needle forward in the automotive industry.
So we're doing it. We're not doing it enough.
Right. Yeah. Or as often as it should be, or, like I said, throughout the year,
Noreen, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree with Bridget. And not only do we all need to use our voices, I think we have a responsibility to use our voices. But we also need to bring up the next generation behind us. And we haven't touched on it yet, I don't think, but allyship is critical. We can't do this by ourselves. We need our male allies. And I don't see it as an either or. I don't see it as a zero-sum game. I think we're all stronger and we make the industry stronger when we work together on these kinds of important issues, whether it be individually within your own organizations, getting engaged with the organizations that have already been mentioned, and there are some others that are out there. But make sure you use your voice, make sure you bring up other women along with you, and make sure you're thinking about creating more allies. We need them.
Absolutely. Tonya.
I'm just going to end with what Noreen said. Make sure you bring other women up with you. Like it's really critical, I think, for women to think about the fact that they don't have to be the only one in the room, and stop thinking that we have to compete against each other, right? So again, what Bridget said, men have 100-year start. So, if you've got 100-year start, then you need to make sure that whoever's in the room with you, as far as like another woman, that you're advocating for her, even sometimes where it may feel uncomfortable for you. Like Noreen, sorry, I don't think you guys heard what Noreen just said. Really making sure that we're speaking up for each other. So I just want to put a period in that, Noreen, because I think that's important.
Couldn't agree more. Kirsten.
I'm going to echo the same thoughts, where sometimes when you have that uniqueness, right? Where I'm sure in our careers, we've all seen scenarios where there may be a woman who's the only woman in the room in that environment. Yeah. And instead of lending that hand down and lifting someone else up, it's kind of more of I'll call it a queen bee approach. It doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. There's so many opportunities for all of us, and it's better when there are more voices across the board and there's additional diversity, whether it is not just women as well. I mean, this is one aspect, and this is Women's History Month, of course, but I mean, there's so many, whether it's from making sure that you have representation from people of color, from different backgrounds, from different, ethnicities, everything, right? So it doesn't have to be that queen bee environment. Make sure that we're not competing against each other. We're not competing for the one spot. Why aren't there more spots? Should be the question.
That's right.
That's pretty powerful, Kirsten. Why aren't there more spots? And as we've said earlier, we've seen what happens when those spots open. To Noreen's point, there's data that bears out business does better. Brenna, you're on mute.
Yeah, I do that because they keep paging stuff, and you guys don't need to hear that.
That's what happens when you're the big boss.
Well, that's what happens when you don't know how to mute your phone. I don't know that I can add anything to what the ladies have already said. I did make a few notes, and I 100% agree. Here we go. Sorry. It shouldn't just be a month. Why is it just a month? Why aren't we continually celebrating each other? Why aren't we continually communicating with each other? It just seems to be like we get together, conferences, there'll be a session for women or about women. And then wonderful Zoom calls like this where we're able to express, what we've gone through and what we've done. But why aren't we doing this more often? Why are we just doing this once a year? Why is it just a convention? I think we've all just grabbed onto something right there when we talk about this. We need to do more of this.
And there's this idea that Noreen and I talk about of rigor and normalcy, right? And I think Noreen and I had a conversation, this is not a verbatim, but I can't tell you how many sexual harassment courses I've taken. I can't tell you how many insider trading courses I've taken. They're part of the course. They are part of the job, right? Conversations like this aren't necessarily part of the job, and maybe we can find ways to add them into our curriculum so that they are part of the job, so that we actually do spend more than, I'm not talking about TrueCar as a collective, I'm just talking about as an industry, that we do spend more than just March talking about this group or February talking about that group or April talking about that group. So the good news is, a spoiler alert, this conversation is going to live in perpetuity across our channels, because we are not going to let this conversation die. You're going to be seeing yourselves spread out all over the internet for the next couple weeks and months, because we are serious about keeping this conversation going. I'm looking at the clock. All right, cool. So we got time for two quick questions. Okay. The first one is, it's kind of important for me selfishly, because I don't identify as a woman, but I do identify as an ally. How do allies better support? How do we show up? What do we do for you? What do you need us to know? Tonya, start with you.
I'll just use two phrases. See something, say something. See nothing, do something. It's really that simple. If you don't feel like there's enough activity that's happening around, diversity inclusion specifically for women, do something. You have the opportunity to do it. And then, just like all the panelists have said, if you see something happening, it's really what allyship is stepping up and addressing it. Whether, like Bridget said, you take the person offline and have a conversation with them, but that's a responsibility to me of an ally.
Right. So you're saying, you see an offense, and don't just leave it on the person who was offended to take up that fight. Yeah. Jump in and try to make, that's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Kirsten, what do I need to know? I can't be that selfish. It ain't about me. What do us allies need to know as we support in this industry?
I agree with what Tonya just said, and something as simple as what Noreen mentioned earlier of how do I get started? I think sometimes people have really good intentions and they want to do it, but what do I do? So even something as simple as when you're in meetings, and if it happens all the time, right? When a woman is talked over, or when an idea she may have just presented is suddenly presented a couple minutes later by a gentleman in the room, not calling that out, right, to shame or humiliate anyone else, but just making sure that you're addressing that of as Noreen suggested earlier, it was perfect phrasing of, Brenna, I think you were mentioning a comment earlier. Do you have additional thoughts to share? I don't think you got to finish your idea. Or, Matt, that's a fantastic idea. That's the same idea that Bridget had just brought up. I absolutely support that, right? So it's not shaming or humiliating that other person, but just how can you advocate for that in real time?
Love it. I've seen that happen in real life. As a junior person, I was actually the beneficiary of that in real life. And it's incredibly powerful, not just in theory, but in practice as a person who has benefited from that. It's incredibly powerful. Bridget.
Yes, I think that what you all are saying, it's helpful for both parties. I think when someone steps up or speaks up when they see something, it not only helps the the woman in the room, but it also helps that person, like I said before, that might not have even realized that what they said or did was offensive or was insulting. I've had this happen in a room recently. I was with 3 men and myself, and someone said something that was a little off-putting, but the conversation kept going. But somebody else next to him said, "Oh," in a very professional way. It wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't calling him out. It was just, hey, what she was trying to ask or say was this, and it was helpful for me because I didn't have to say something myself and look like, we can often be called names when we are assertive. And then I think the gentleman who was being that way, he was like, oh, okay, he understood and he took it the right way. So it's important for all parties involved.
Noreen.
2 related thoughts. One is just be more aware and be listening, as we've talked about. If you're in conversations with mixed company and there's a sense that women aren't being heard, just kind of tune into that. And the way that you can become even more aware is to continuously learn. I'll give TrueCar a plug. We recently rolled out training called Unconscious Bias Training, and it was an excellent program because it went right to the assumptions that you grew up with, the assumptions you heard in your family that may be dated, and you just carry it through without even being aware of what you're doing. So just continue to educate yourself and engage. And as Kirsten and others have said, if you're not sure how, ask. Go to female colleagues that you respect and say, how can I support you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad that we're having this think tank here. Brenna?
Noreen just used all my words, them all, because what came to my mind was just supporting each other in every way that we can, in any situation that we can, to be there for each other. Because women, I mean, we all know women can be a little catty. It's calling a spade. And we need to stop doing that. And we need to support each other and come alongside each other and educate and support. I mean, that Noreen, when you said that, I was like, oh, she took my word. But it just says that we all kind of have that same, we've gone through the same type of thing at different situations, different scenarios. But when it all comes down to it, it's Tonya, see something, say something, do something, support each other.
I mentioned this dude earlier, and I'm sorry, I probably won't mention him again, but my kid, I'm really fond of that guy. And I talked to him about these conversations, and I've asked him, I said, what do allies need to do? And I want to throw in his answer, because I think it's very important, not for you guys, but for the people listening. He says, believe me, if I tell you something, even if it doesn't strike you as realistic because of your experience and the life that you've lived, believe me when I tell you something's happening to me. That's how I need my allies to show up for me. And I thought, man, we're lucky. We're pretty lucky that we get to have conversations like this. We're also pretty lucky that we get to work in environments with a range of people, because I couldn't have come up with that. My learning in the 90s would have never given me that. But the generation that he is in and the way that he takes in information and the life that they're living gave him, it knocked me out. So for the allies out there, that's from a 27-year-old male. He says, this is how you can show up as a better ally. Believe me when I say I need you, even if it doesn't seem true to you. We are about to wrap up now. We've got like 3 minutes left, 5 minutes left. So last question, knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given your younger self when you were starting your career in this industry that we all love and adore? Just give you a second to let that question sink in. What would you tell younger you, knowing what you know now, as advice when jumping into automotive? And Kirsten, I'd like to start with you if I could.
Yeah, and so I've only ever been in automotive, but I really think that this is true for anyone starting out their career, is don't be afraid to be your genuine, authentic self. I mean, in auto, when I started, I, was often the only woman in the room. I didn't have a lot of counterparts in that space. And, I didn't always necessarily feel as though I could be, like completely myself, right? Like had to be a little more guarded. And I would be so much more transparent now. And I am much more transparent now, where it wasn't that anything was misrepresented, but rather that I didn't feel comfortable with sharing it. And be in a space, be in an environment where you are comfortable doing that, and that you can be your genuine, authentic self.
Tonya, you touched on being your true self, so I'd like to ask that next question to you.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. First of all, I want to say that your son's statement gave me chills. So that's phenomenal. That is how he thinks allies should show up. I would say for me, early on, it's recognizing I'm going to make mistakes. I am going to make mistakes. I am going to make mistakes. And it's just giving myself the grace to recognize that in spite of the mistakes I make, that's how you grow. That's how you learn. And hopefully the mistake then allows you to do something better. Like I'm a believer, I think Kirsten said, when you know better, do better. So that mistake allowed me to know better. So I'm doing better. So that's what I would say to myself. You're going to make mistakes, Tonya.
Awesome. I love it. I know I've made me some mistakes. Brenna.
Okay, I'm going to read what is on my wall. So I'm going to turn my head, but I'm going to read what's on my wall. It says, of course, hold on. It says, it's okay to fail. That's how we learn. Lean on others with experience. Listen, educate, and dominate. That's what I said to my younger self.
I love it. I love it. Bridget.
Yes. First, I want to say, Matt, I love the conversation with your son. I, too, have a 27-year-old son, and I think it's important for us to talk to our kids, whether they're young or grown adults now, about this very topic. So kudos to you for that. But, you know, we all have heard Sheryl Sandberg say, lean in. But in this industry, you have to jump in. So I think I would have told myself that don't be afraid to just jump in, and don't underestimate yourself, Bridget, because you're a lot smarter than you think you are.
Noreen.
The note that I made to myself when you asked this question, I think kind of sums up what everyone has said so far. Be brave. Don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask someone to be your mentor or advocate for you. Be brave.
Guys, I really dig my job at TrueCar. I mean, I do. I'd say it if I wasn't on this panel. But one of the things that's super duper is I actually get paid to do things like this. Get to learn, get to show stuff, get to elevate incredible voices across the automotive industry. So on behalf of TrueCar, and of course, behalf of me, the utmost sincerity, thank you so much for your time, for your willingness to because you guys are all bosses. You guys all have big, important days. Bridget's even moving. I thank all of you for cutting time out to be a part of this conversation. I think this was an hour well spent. Before we go, I'd like, does anybody have any parting remarks? I love it, Noreen. Be brave. We could all use that, regardless of where we are in our career. Anybody have any parting remarks before we wrap this up in the next few seconds?
I think just a big thanks to TrueCar and Matt and Noreen for leading this conversation. And your voice is very influential, and I think it's important. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
And I'll echo Matt's thanks to all of our panelists for giving us an hour of your time. I really enjoyed the conversation, learned a lot from it, and I hope you did as well.
Thank you for having us.
You guys are incredible. Thank you, everybody. Wait, I was going to say until next March. No, I wasn't, because we're not waiting a year to have these conversations no more. Until the next time we connect and have a conversation, we look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank
Matt.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.